Director Raoul Walsh gambled everything on 70mm grandeur technology, creating breathtaking panoramic shots that captured the American frontier like never before. The massive cameras required specialized equipment and crews, transforming what should have been a straightforward Western into a logistical marathon across 7 states. Walsh's ambitious vision demanded authenticity, real wagon trains, genuine landscapes, and a cast of thousands trudging through actual wilderness. John Wayne, plucked from relative obscurity, suddenly found himself carrying a multi-million-dollar production on his shoulders. At 23, the young actor possessed the physical presence Walsh wanted, but lacked the seasoned charisma audience expected from leading men. His earnest performance, while competent, couldn't overcome the film's fundamental problem. Theaters simply weren't equipped to showcase its revolutionary format. Only a handful of cinemas nationwide could project 70mm film, severely limiting the Big Trail's initial release. Fox executives, desperate to recoup their investment, created a standard 35mm version that stripped away the visual spectacle entirely. Film historians note that audiences watching the downgraded print saw a conventional Western with unremarkable cinematography, missing the sweeping vistas and epic scope that justified the film's existence. The commercial disaster was swift and brutal, with the film recouping only a fraction of its substantial budget. Theater owners, already struggling with Depression-era economics, couldn't justify installing expensive new projection equipment for a single film. Wayne's promising career stalled immediately. He spent the next decade in low-budget westerns and serials, not regaining major studio stardom until Red River nearly 2 decades later. The irony was crushing. The Big Trail represented a quantum leap in cinematic technology, yet its innovation became its greatest liability. David O. Selznick's relentless perfectionism transformed what should have been a straightforward Western epic into Hollywood's most chaotic production nightmare. The producer rewrote scripts nightly, sometimes hourly, forcing directors to reshoot scenes multiple times as his vision constantly evolved. King Vidor, the original director, clashed repeatedly with Selznick over creative control before eventually walking away from the project entirely. William Dieterle and others stepped in, but the constant directorial turnover created a film with wildly inconsistent tones and styles. Jennifer Jones's casting as Pearl Chavez ignited immediate controversy. Selznick's insistence on using his white contract player to portray a mixed-race character drew sharp criticism from industry insiders and audiences alike. Jones herself later admitted the role's melodramatic demands felt overwrought, but Selznick remained convinced her star power would elevate the material. Her performance, while committed, polarized viewers. Some praised her emotional intensity, while others found her portrayal uncomfortably exaggerated. The film's explicit violence and sensuality triggered fierce battles with censorship boards nationwide. Selznick deliberately pushed boundaries, believing controversy would create publicity, but the strategy backfired spectacularly. Conservative markets refused to screen the film, while required cuts butchered key dramatic moments. The climactic shootout between Jones and Gregory Peck, originally designed as a passionate finale, became choppy and confusing after censors demanded extensive edits. Despite lavish production values and stunning Technicolor cinematography, Duel in the Sun earned the derisive nickname Lust in the Dust from critics who found its melodramatic excess laughable rather than moving. The film's narrative focus suffered under Selznick's micromanagement. Romantic subplots competed with Western action, while psychological drama clashed with epic spectacle. What emerged was a beautiful but incoherent mess that satisfied neither Western fans nor melodrama enthusiasts. Kirk Douglas and director Robert Aldrich turned what should have been a straightforward Western into a battleground of competing visions. Douglas, fresh off his success in Spartacus, pushed for a more traditional heroic narrative, while Aldrich envisioned a darker, morally ambiguous tale that challenged Western conventions. According to some accounts, their creative clash erupted during daily script conferences, with Douglas reportedly storming off set multiple times when Aldrich refused to soften his character's more unsavory traits. Dalton Trumbo's original screenplay had crafted a psychologically complex story exploring themes of obsession and moral decay. However, studio executives, nervous about the material's controversial elements, demanded extensive rewrites that stripped away much of the narrative's emotional depth. The loyalty questionnaire subplot that gave the story its political edge was watered down to avoid controversy, while character motivations became increasingly muddled with each revision. Trumbo, still operating under blacklist restrictions, had limited power to protect his vision from these damaging alterations. Aldrich found himself caught between Douglas's star power and studio demands, struggling to maintain any coherent tone. The director's attempts to balance action sequences with psychological drama resulted in jarring tonal shifts that confused audiences. Scenes of brutal violence sat uncomfortably alongside romantic interludes, while the film's moral center became increasingly unclear as competing agendas shaped the final product. The finished film reflected every compromise and conflict that plagued its production. Critics noted the movie's inability to decide whether it wanted to be a traditional Western or a psychological character study. Audiences expecting either Douglas's typical heroic performance or Aldrich's signature cynicism instead encountered a frustrating hybrid that delivered neither effectively. The Last Sunset became a warning story about how even A-list talent couldn't overcome fundamental creative disagreements and studio interference. John Sturges faced an impossible creative puzzle when he set out to craft a Western that could simultaneously mock and celebrate the genre's conventions. The director envisioned a sprawling comedy that would lampoon frontier mythology while delivering the epic spectacle audiences craved, but this ambitious balancing act proved far more treacherous than anticipated. Studio executives at MGM, already nervous about satirizing their profitable Western formula, reportedly demanded constant script revisions that allegedly diluted the film's satirical bite while inflating its runtime to an unwieldy 2 hours and 45 minutes. The ensemble cast, featuring Burt Lancaster, Lee Remick, Jim Hutton, and Donald Pleasance, created a logistical nightmare. Some suggest it stretched production schedules and budgets beyond reason. According to industry speculation, coordinating scenes with multiple stars required intricate scheduling that often left actors waiting for days between takes, killing the spontaneous energy essential to effective comedy. Some observers noted that Lancaster, accustomed to commanding dramatic roles, struggled with the film's slapstick elements, while the supporting players competed for screen time and increasingly frantic performances. Sturges found himself trapped between competing demands. MGM wanted spectacular action sequences to justify the $7 million budget, while the satirical elements required intimate character moments that clashed with epic Western conventions. The resulting film lurched awkwardly between broad physical comedy and sweeping frontier drama, satisfying neither approach effectively. Critics noted that audiences expecting traditional Western action felt cheated by the comedic interludes, while those seeking sophisticated satire were overwhelmed by the film's bloated spectacle. The commercial failure was devastating and immediate, with the Hallelujah Trail earning back less than half its production cost during its initial theatrical run. Many film historians suggest the film's identity crisis became a sobering lesson about the dangers of genre experimentation without clear creative vision. Arthur Penn's directorial debut brought a method-acting sensibility to the Western that felt jarringly out of place in 1958. The young director, fresh from television work, approached Billy the Kid not as a romantic outlaw, but as a deeply troubled young man wrestling with psychological demons. Penn's vision demanded introspective character studies where audiences expected gunfights, creating an uncomfortable disconnect that left traditionalists bewildered. Newman reportedly focused his preparation on Billy's psychological instability, resulting in a performance that emphasized neurotic vulnerability over heroic bravado. The actor portrayed Billy as impulsive and emotionally unstable, prone to sudden violent outbursts that seemed to surprise even himself. This interpretation clashed dramatically with the mythic gunslinger persona that Western fans cherished, transforming an iconic figure into something uncomfortably human and unpredictable. The film's narrative structure abandoned the clear moral framework that defined successful Westerns of the era. Penn refused to provide easy heroes or villains, instead presenting a morally ambiguous world where violence erupted from psychological wounds rather than noble causes. Scenes lingered on character introspection rather than action, while the pacing deliberately avoided the rhythmic build-up to climactic showdowns that audiences anticipated. Critics found themselves divided between admiration for the film's artistic ambition and frustration with its commercial miscalculation. Some praised Newman's fearless commitment to an unconventional interpretation, while others argued that his brooding intensity was fundamentally mismatched to the Western genre's requirements. The film's box office performance reflected this critical split, earning respectable reviews from serious film journals while failing to connect with mainstream audiences who felt betrayed by its psychological complexity. Many observers believe MGM's boardroom executives thought they could resurrect the magic of their 1931 Oscar winner simply by throwing money at bigger sets and more elaborate costumes. The studio allocated a staggering $4 million to recreate the Oklahoma land rush with thousands of extras and meticulously crafted period details. Yet critics argued the production somehow forgot to invest equal attention in the script that would tie these spectacular elements together. Director Anthony Mann, known for his psychological westerns, reportedly found himself constrained by studio demands for spectacle over substance. Critical consensus held that Glenn Ford's casting as Yancey Cravat proved particularly problematic, as his naturally reserved screen presence clashed with the character's larger-than-life personality. According to contemporary reviews, Ford delivered his lines with mechanical precision, but lacked the charismatic fire that made the role memorable in Edna Ferber's original novel. Critics noted his performance felt detached and wooden, as if he were reading from cue cards rather than inhabiting a complex character. Meanwhile, reviewers praised Maria Schell for bringing genuine emotional depth to Sabra Cravat. The film's 3-hour runtime attempted to chronicle decades of Oklahoma history, jumping between Yancey's newspaper crusades, oil boom politics, and Sabra's evolving independence. Critical opinion suggested this sprawling approach left audiences struggling to maintain emotional investment in any single storyline. Many felt the narrative lacked the focused drive that made the original compelling, instead feeling like a series of disconnected historical vignettes held together by lavish production values. Cimarron's commercial disaster reportedly sent shockwaves through Hollywood's executive suites, earning back only $2 million of its production costs during initial release. Film historians often cite the film's failure as marking a turning point for the industry, as studios began questioning whether audiences still hungered for the grand Western epics. Wayne's decision to direct his own passion project about the legendary Texas battle transformed what should have been a straightforward historical epic into a financial and creative nightmare that some say nearly destroyed his career. The Duke mortgaged his personal assets and convinced United Artists to back his vision of American heroism, but his perfectionist demands for authentic period details sent costs spiraling from an initial $3 million to over $12 million. Wayne insisted on constructing a full-scale replica of the Alamo mission, complete with historically accurate adobe walls and period-appropriate cannons. The production became what many observers described as a logistical disaster, as Wayne struggled to balance his roles as star, director, and producer simultaneously. Crew members reportedly worked 18-hour days under scorching desert conditions, with Wayne himself collapsing from exhaustion during particularly demanding sequences. Many felt his inexperience behind the camera showed in endless retakes and indecisive direction that stretched the shooting schedule far beyond its planned timeline. Historians and critics widely criticized the film's romanticized portrayal of the famous siege, attacking Wayne's simplistic good versus evil narrative that ignored the complex political realities of 1836 Texas. Academic critics argued that the film reduced nuanced historical figures to cardboard heroes, while completely whitewashing the controversial aspects of Texas independence. Critics contended that the screenplay transformed Davy Crockett and Jim Bowie into flawless American icons. Despite earning 7 Academy Award nominations, including Best Picture, the film barely recouped its massive production costs during its initial release. Wayne's personal investment left him financially devastated, forcing him to sell his beloved production company to cover mounting debts. The film's commercial disappointment has been cited as a harsh reminder that patriotic spectacle alone couldn't guarantee success. Independent production companies in 1958 faced brutal realities that even acclaimed directors couldn't overcome. Michael Curtiz, the mastermind behind Casablanca, found himself wrestling with a $1.5 million budget that severely limited his promotional reach compared to major studio releases flooding theaters that same year. The Proud Rebels' financing came from Samuel Goldwyn Jr.'s fledgling company, which lacked the distribution muscle to secure prime theater bookings or launch nationwide advertising campaigns. Alan Ladd's portrayal of John Chandler marked a significant departure from his typical tough guy roles, showcasing emotional vulnerability as a Confederate veteran struggling to help his traumatized mute son heal from war's psychological wounds. Critics praised Ladd's nuanced performance, noting how he conveyed paternal desperation through subtle facial expressions rather than his usual stoic demeanor. The role demanded genuine emotional range that revealed depths many hadn't seen from the Shane star. Curtiz's reputation for prestige filmmaking created unrealistic expectations for a project constrained by modest resources. Some believe that the director's meticulous attention to character development and period authenticity may have required extensive rehearsal time and multiple takes that stretched the limited budget thin. It suggested that his insistence on authentic Civil War-era costumes and historically accurate set pieces might have consumed funds that could have been allocated towards securing better theater chains. The film's theatrical release remained confined to second-tier cinema circuits, preventing it from reaching the broad audiences that might have appreciated its thoughtful approach to post-war trauma and family healing. Decades later, television broadcasts and home video releases allowed the proud rebel to find its intended audience, transforming it into a cult classic that film historians now cite as evidence of what independent westerns could achieve. Howard Hughes' obsession with authenticity led him to choose Utah's sweeping desert landscapes for his Mongol epic, but the location sat directly downwind from the Nevada test site, where the government had detonated 11 atomic bombs just 2 years earlier. The cast and crew spent months filming in contaminated sand and dust, with some accounts suggesting radioactive particles swirled through every scene as they recreated 13th century Mongolia in the American Southwest. Wayne's casting as Genghis Khan became Hollywood legend for all the wrong reasons, transforming what should have been an epic historical drama into unintentional comedy. The Duke's distinctive drawl and swagger, perfect for cattle drives and saloon brawls, felt jarringly out of place when delivering lines about Mongol conquest and Asian philosophy. Critics mercilessly mocked his performance, with reviewers suggesting Wayne seemed to be playing a cowboy who had accidentally wandered into the wrong movie set. Hughes poured massive resources into elaborate costumes and sprawling battle sequences, yet the film's dialogue remained painfully stilted throughout. Characters spoke in pseudo-Shakespearean verse that bore no resemblance to how actual Mongols might have communicated, creating an artificial tone that undermined every dramatic scene. The script's attempts at epic grandeur instead produced memorable howlers that film scholars still quote as examples of Hollywood's tone-deaf approach to historical subjects. The Conqueror's Duel legacy as both a health tragedy and creative disaster serves as Hollywood's most sobering reminder about the dangers of vanity projects and poor location scouting, proving that even unlimited budgets cannot overcome fundamentally flawed creative decisions. If you've enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our new videos each week. Thanks for watching.